Welcome to the special meeting of the Murfreesboro City Council. This afternoon, we're going to talk about the budget. It's May 21st, 2020. I would like everyone in the council chambers. We found out yesterday that Dr. Linda Gilbert passed away, and I know that we've all been dealing with that over the last 36 hours. But we really want to keep their family in our prayers, to keep all the people that she has worked with, and especially over these last 2 or 3 months. I can't tell you how many conversations and the emails that I get from her at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning when she's still working. And so I really don't have words to say the loss that our school system is going to have with her not being there, but I think it'd be appropriate if we would. Let's have a moment of silence for Dr. Gilbert. Thank you. All right, Mr. Tyndall, we'll move into fiscal year 21 budget discussions.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn it over to our budget director.
Hi, good afternoon. So the last time I presented to you was in February, and we were reviewing the CIP and preparing for next year's budget. At that time, we were anticipating a strong budget year with continued sales and other local tax growth.
Here,
I'm sorry.
maybe you good to pull the microphone a little closer. I don't think we can hear you.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Then coronavirus hit. A lot has changed both here and across the globe as we've dealt with the pandemic from COVID-19. Here's a quick recap of what the coronavirus has looked like here in Murfreesboro. In early March, we saw the first case reported in Tennessee, and by the 13th, saw our first case here in Rutherford County. 3 days later, Governor Lee urged our school systems to close to the end of the month, and then by the 18th, we began limiting attendance at city council meetings. Then the next day, we implemented a citywide hiring freeze for all non-essential positions, and as part of the school closures, the decision was made to close Parks and Rec facilities on March 20th. On March 21st, the mayor declared a state of emergency, and city facilities began closing and alternative work arrangements implemented. As part of the state of emergency declaration, on the 23rd, restaurants, gyms, and exercise facilities and other businesses were ordered to close. The next day, city schools announced they would close through April 24th. And on March 25th, all city facilities were closed to the public and non-essential staff. On the 28th, the mayor's emergency declaration was extended along with safer at-home guidance. And then by early April, the governor issued a stay-at-home order, and city staff were limited to critical personnel only, and city council meetings started being held remotely through Facebook Live and City TV. Mid-April saw schools being asked to close for the rest of the school year, and then by the end of April, our state of emergency declaration and the state stay-at-home order expired. In early May, city facilities and most other businesses started reopening to the public, many with capacity restrictions in place. And May 7th, council resumed your in-person meetings while continuing the social distancing. And today, our city manager announced that with the exception of some Parks and Rec facilities, the city will resume normal operations starting next week. So that's a lot that's happened in just 2 months. When we started the budget, we had expectations of continued revenue growth. We had several priority projects planned in the 21 budget, including additional police officers, public safety software and equipment, and IT enhancements. We'd also budgeted modest raises, an increase to health insurance premiums, and additional debt service for 20 and 21 CIP projects. Our departments went through the full budget process pre-COVID-19, including submitting their budgets, having review meetings with admin and finance. However, as the dynamics changed each day and implications of COVID-19 seemed to be more far-reaching than we first anticipated, we quickly reassessed the budget both on revenue and expenditure sides. That included requesting departments to resubmit their budgets with no supplemental requests. At the same time, we implemented the non-critical hiring and spending freezes, and decided to pull funding requests for the 20 and 21 CIP. We do plan to come back in the fall with a CIP plan once we have a better idea of how the economy is looking next year. Now, when it comes to general funds fund balance, we have unassigned fund balance that we can use for general spending purposes, and we also have restricted and committed fund balances. And these are items that can only be used for specific purposes, regardless of general economic conditions. Restricted funds are made up of things like the gas tax, which is restricted for state street aid purposes, and donations may be committed for specific purposes as well. Since those items are recognized as revenues when we receive the funds, when we're actually able to spend the money, we'll be spending restricted or committed fund balances down. So when we first worked up the preliminary budget, we were working on a balanced budget when it comes to the unassigned fund balance. About $756,000 was being planned to use out of restricted and committed funds for state street aid, police, recreation, and the street departments. With the budget that was submitted to you last week, we're looking at using around $4.7 million of unassigned fund balance and still spend those restricted funds. So you can see here how the budget's changed from before COVID-19 and after. The bar on the left shows the revenues were projected around $194 million before coronavirus, and the one on the right shows where we're now budgeting around $178 million on the revenue side. The expenditures are shown on this horizontal line, and as you can see on the left, expenditures were essentially balanced with revenues when you take out the restricted expenses. And both revenues and expenditures show a sharp drop on the right side of the graph. But while revenues are dropping around 8% over what we originally projected, expenditures are showing more like a 6% drop. So that gap you see between the expenditure line and the revenue bar is our use of fund balance. The next few slides are going to show where we were projecting some of our major revenues and how the coronavirus is expected to impact those revenues. Here we see local sales tax. On the left, you can see we originally projected a modest growth for fiscal year 21, around 2 to 2.5% over this year's budget. You can see how this is going up each year from fiscal year 18 to FY21 in our original projections. The chart on the right shows where we're projecting 20 and 21 now. So where we originally expected to bring in around $50 million in sales tax this year and an additional $1 million or so next year, we now anticipate closer to $45 million this year and a little under $42 million next year. Overall, we're showing around a 14.5% drop from this year's budget on local sales tax. And the majority of this decrease is expected in the first quarter of the year, around 55 to 60%, those first few months, and then relatively flat collections for the remainder of the year. And we'll monitor these, actual collections as they come in and adjust our budget as necessary through the year. The same reductions are showing for state share sales tax as well. Originally, we expected to finish out this year around $500,000 above budget, around $11.5 million, and then we expected modest growth for next year at around $11.7 million. Now, the budget presented to you anticipates around $10 million this year and around $9.5 million next year, which is a 13% drop from this year's budget. So as we all know, tourism and traveling have taken a major hit. So we've adjusted the projected hotel motel tax revenues down from $3.2 million to $2.3 this year, and we reduced it by half for next year at $1.6 million. We also expect business license to take a hit. We're estimating a budget deficit around $500,000 this year and about $1 million next year. Due to the timing of business tax returns, we get about 75% of these collections in the last quarter of the fiscal year, so we really don't have any data to go on yet on that. And we show other revenues decreasing for Parks and Rec, golf, planning, and building and codes as well. Are there any questions about our revenue projections before I move into the expense side?
Hey, Aaron, this is Ronnie Martin.
Hey, Ronnie.
will you talk a little bit about the methodology for the modeling to come up with the 50% haircut on the hotel motel, and then I guess it was 17% on consumption and sales, how you got there?
Well, we didn't have a whole lot of data to go on, but based on all of the closures, we looked at our month-by-month history for our sales tax revenues and, you know, did our best estimates to see where we thought things might come out, with restaurants being so limited on capacity, and even though things may be open back up, there may be areas where people just still aren't comfortable to go back out and do the full-blown shopping and dining out experiences. Again, like I said, we'll be monitoring and adjusting, so if we see that we're too high or too low on those monthly projections, we'll, you know, notify council and make adjustments to the budget as necessary. On hotel motel, you know, we are a month behind on those collections, and we did see a significant drop for the April and May collection so far. So just based off that, to be conservative, you know, we anticipated very little hotel motel revenues through the end of the calendar year, through December, and are optimistic that hopefully starting in calendar year 21, things will pick back up on that area.
Thanks for that. I had one other question. You know, we have heard in the news a lot of discussion about, at the state level, those revenue numbers being down about 40%. How do you think that will impact us, and why are those numbers so high compared to our numbers on the consumption side?
Well, Nashville, I think, brings in a huge amount of the state shared sales tax dollars, and they're shut down completely, and I think that the implications of their extended shutdown and there's such a heavy tourism and travel base may really, and same with Memphis, I think that could significantly impact, since that's a state shared sales tax. You know, I think that'll impact the state side. I anticipate right now, at least, that that'll anticipate this impact the state side greater than the local sales tax side.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, no problem.
And Aaron, I think the one thing, I know you mentioned tourism, but I think the entertainment taxes and stuff like that you would normally see in Nashville,
Right.
It's going to have a significant impact that we will not see in Murfreesboro. I mean,
Right.
we're hurt by the fact that there weren't any football or basketball or whatever sports, but not at the entertainment taxes that
Yeah.
they see revenue off of in Nashville.
Our economy is not as dependent on those tourism dollars as Nashville's is, that's for sure. Are there any other questions before I get into the expense side?
Aaron,
Yes, ma'am.
this is Madeline. On that 1.7 million deferral of debt services funding for the CIP project, what specifically are we deferring?
I'm sorry. I didn't.
Can you
Madeline, I'm
repeat
sorry.
that? You're hard to hear.
On the 1.76 million deferral of debt service?
Okay, that was the, yes, ma'am. The fiscal year 20 CIP that I presented in February, essentially all of those projects are deferred for right now, as are the 21 CIP projects that we originally intended to submit with the 21 budget, but then decided we would hold on to that and see how things kind of shake out with after the first quarter of fiscal year 21. I will say that we're reviewing all of our active projects as well, and deferring and holding off on what we can on those that we've already borrowed money for, and then proceeding on the ones that need to keep moving forward.
Okay, by doing that, would that have any effect on our credit bond rating or anything like that?
No, ma'am. That was anticipated new debt service that we pulled out of the budget for next year for the CIP. So, if anything, it would help, I would imagine, because we're not asking to borrow any more funds at this time. Actually, we had a Moody's review this week, and we just got reaffirmed with our AA1 rating on the bond market. So, I don't anticipate any problems from that.
Okay, thank you.
So in response to our expected revenue drops for next year, we cut out nearly $12 million in expenditures as well. And this includes general requests, including around $2.5 million for raises, almost $700,000 for an 8% medical insurance premium increase, and new debt service for the 20 and 21 CIPs. In addition, virtually all supplemental requests were eliminated from the budget, including new positions and various software and equipment purchases. We also budgeted for an allowance for vacancies at $1.3 million this year. This will be evaluated throughout the year. If we find that more positions are staying filled than we currently anticipate, we'll bring back a budget amendment for those positions. We moved $565,000 in fixed assets that were budgeted in general fund and moved those into the capital improvement and contingency fund so that we could spend the fund balance down in that fund. The items can be purchased out of this fund that would otherwise qualify for short or long-term debt. So the things that we moved there include police ballistics vests, golf equipment and carts, recreation equipment, IT and communication equipment, and roof repairs for City Hall. So that's just a high-level overview of our expenditure cuts. Are there any questions about those cuts?
Yes, that medical premium increase, was that just additional staffing for the healthcare, or how were you able to claim that figure at 8%?
So our benefits consultant recommended an increase to our medical premiums. We're self-insured for our health insurance.
Right.
And so we originally anticipated, and originally we're budgeting an 8% premium increase to employees and to the city. But since we took out the raises, we decided instead to hold off on that. We think that the insurance fund balance can absorb that at least for part of the year. And we'll revisit that later in fiscal year 21 if needed.
Okay, thank you.
So overall,
I have a
you're looking at a roughly $12 million decrease in expenditures from.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I have a question, Aaron.
Yes, ma'am.
On that 1.6 million deferral of the 19 police officers, does this mean that we have that many vacant positions that we're not going to fill? We're not going to have new positions?
Those were new positions that were requested in the budget that we did not add to the budget. We did not take away any we did not take away any positions.
Okay, thank you. One other question. And I know that even the employees were not really expecting a raise because of the economy. Nobody's getting one that in any state that I know of, or friends I'm talking to. And we talk about the city, we are city of customer service organization. So in order just to say appreciation, we know what you're doing, we know how hard you're working to our employees. Can we give them an extra day of comp? That's not going to have an effect on the budget at all. Can we give them everybody a comp day? Because, with all this going on and all the pressure and strain of everybody and our employees, I think it would be a good idea to give the employees a one comp day. Just to show our appreciation for what they do.
Yeah, Councilmember Scales-Harris, we can take a look at that and factor it in. A lot of our employees have, not a lot, some of our employees have been off and have been paid during that period of time. Some have been working from home. So you know, that would be part of our consideration, but obviously there is a cost to the city because we have to make up for when employees are out, either by backfilling or overtime. It's not consistent across the city, but we'll certainly take a look at it.
It'll be good for the morale. I think it'll be good for the morale of people. Even though, and I understand that a lot of them have been at home, but it's still been very stressful under these circumstances. So I'd just like us to give them that confidence.
Okay, so for our FY21 strategy, we'll closely monitor our budget to actual results and economic forecasts. As we monitor revenues, we'll continue to carefully manage and scrutinize our expenses as well. New grant opportunities will be reviewed and grant revenues maximized as much as possible, and we're currently evaluating grant opportunities from the feds for Rover, public safety equipment, community development, and other possible COVID-19 related grants. The state announced grant awards for local governments last month that are broader in scope, so we're working to determine the best use of those funds as well, and we'll bring that back to council for review and approval once those uses have been identified. Though many economic development activities have paused over the last few weeks, we plan to get things started back up as soon as possible. As we resume these activities, we hope to bring new projects to council in the coming months that will encourage and stimulate our economy. And also, as I mentioned previously, the CIP will be brought back to you in the fall for approval, and for now we're looking at what projects can be deferred and what need to keep moving forward. So next year's budget is presented with what we hope is a very conservative revenue and expense expectation. If we see a moderate economic recovery, we may bring back to council budget amendments to incorporate some priority one supplemental requests, including those 19 police officer positions that are needed, IT equipment and software, and fire and rescue equipment. If we see a solid economic recovery, we may evaluate additional amendments for priority 2 supplemental requests, which include additional police and fire technology and equipment. And a strong economic recovery might suggest the ability to fund priority 3 supplemental requests, including those payroll and benefit increases, the health insurance premium increases, new position requests, and various equipment and other miscellaneous needs. So that's in a nutshell what went into making this year's budget. I appreciate all the hard work from our departments, both before and after COVID-19. I know it's been a difficult budget year for everyone, but I appreciate all of the work and patience from our staff as we work through this. Are there any questions?
I'll add that the executive directors and department directors are available if there's any questions directly for them as well.
Total fund balance, right now, we're 61.6 million.
For unassigned, yes.
You know, we've touted fund balance for years for a rainy day fund, and, you know, although this year, I think, on our audited financial statement, what was the total we added to fund balance this year?
About 3.2 million.
And then what are we anticipated, do you think, adding for fiscal year 19 and 20?
We're at this point hoping to break even.
Okay. You know, I know we've made a concerted effort over the last really 3 or 4 years to not use fund balance. And that's one of the reasons we had to make some of the decisions we did last year. But, you know, 61.6 million, and we're only projected to use 4. I mean, that's what it's there for. So.
Right.
If this weren't the case where you would use it, what would be the case, I guess,
Yeah.
is the question. I mean, these are challenging times, and I mean, it's a challenging budget, I think. And I appreciate your aggressiveness. I think we can go for it.
And I'm not going to compare us to other municipalities, but I mean, I know all of us read all the information we get, and you know, I want to say on behalf of the city of Murfreesboro and our staff members, we're not using COVID-19 as an excuse on how that we've handled financially our city over the last 15, 20 years, and I see that from other leaders in the country that are really using this as an excuse for some poor financial planning, and to ensure the residents. That's not what we're doing. I think it's a conservative budget. It's a conservative budget on revenue. I love the way that you've got, if we can go back one slide, Aaron, the strategy that we have that, if things improve, if they improve more than what we expect, or if they get back to where we were, I think that's a great strategy to be able to go through. And, as I think all of us, none of us really don't like being able to reward our employees with raises, but, there's a lot of people who are unemployed right now who are not getting raises. And I would tell our employees that we do have a budget that we're budgeting roughly $10 million less than what we spent last year, and we're not laying anyone off. So I think that's something to give staff really credit for being able to do that.
And while we're at this, I'll just say kind of one of the things I appreciate now, when I spoke with you guys, and it sounded like from our conversation that some of the other council members were leaning this direction on, I just think this is going to be one of those years where we have to revisit the budget more often than we ever have, in all of our years as we get through this thing, because the X factors are so many, so deep that, we get to October, we may be sitting here again talking about this, and maybe September, and for good reason, so that we can do these, and which I like this too. So appreciate that a lot. Appreciate y'all's flexibility.
And to your point, Rick, anybody that tells you today that they know what's going to happen with the economy in the next 6 months is lying. It's an unknown, and we're certainly hoping for the best. And if the federal wants to send some money Murfreesboro way, that's great too. But even with any extra money that may come in, we still have the responsibility to make sure that we put it more towards capital type projects than ongoing expenses, because there may not be a quick recovery on this. So we need to be extremely conservative on it.
Well, and the mindset's out there right now, as of the order that came down for May 22nd, was talking to several of our different restaurant owners that, restaurants are going to open to 100%, but the 6 foot social distancing is still being recommended, which means that your restaurants are only going to be open at 50%.
Yeah.
So, they're really frustrated that putting out that 100% restaurants are going to be open to 100%. Everyone's going to be coming in on Friday expecting we're back to normal, and that's just not going to be the case, which means, from our standpoint, sales tax revenue is not going to be there, and clearly hotel motel tax revenue is not going to be there. The one thing I do think as a city, Craig, that I would say we really need to monitor, the state, I think the number came back that the month of April that they were roughly $700 million down on what had been anticipated, and that really was going to look at wiping out the budget, the surplus. I think we're really going to need to monitor with Mr. Fair. Luckily, we have him to see what's going to be coming down to municipalities on what changes that, shared revenue could be deferred or cut along this next year. So that's something we're going to have to monitor at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting to me, some work that was done prior to this whole event to create the dashboard that you've been prepared for us. It gives us the mechanism to basically see the temperature of what's happening financially with the city on a continuing basis. And I applaud you for doing that, because it's going to really be important, as Eddie was saying, for us to keep our fingers on the pulse so that we understand how things are progressing as well. So
Yeah.
I appreciate the work that went into getting that dashboard put together.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Mr. Tindall, we've had a lot of discussion over the last 2 weeks. As a matter of fact, I know you and I both received an email from Dr. Gilbert probably 48 hours ago about computer expenses, for the school system, on especially not knowing on distance learning as we move through. Is that something that is that in the information technology equipment and software for moderate economic recovery, or where do we have that?
That's, yeah, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, Aaron
Okay.
worked
Yeah.
up some answers for that.
Okay,
We have some excess county shared bonds that we plan to use those funds for in our capital improvement contingency fund. That's also where some of our fixed asset purchases will be coming from, not out of the county shared bond part of
Right.
that fund, but we have that, and we have a little bit of bond money left over from Salem Elementary that we plan to allocate for that as well.
Okay.
So I think that my last communication with Linda a week or so ago was that I thought that we were going to be covered on our existing funds to cover the technology and equipment, I believe fully,
okay.
so.
That expenditure's already been approved by council already, hasn't it?
450.
No, that was for the FY '20
First
when
phase.
we were paying for it out of general fund as that special transfer to the schools. You know, they were asking for it spread over 2 years.
Right.
And so what I was just referring to was the FY '21 portion.
Right.
So I believe the schools anticipate an invoice any day now from Dell for this year's equipment. And so we'll pay that, and then we'll also have that programmed in on the FY '21 budget out of that separate fund.
I know they need them going into this coming year because of all that, that's something we need to,
Yeah, definitely got to keep an eye on all the technology. Yep, that's right.
sure is very important.
So is that enough funding for every kid to have a computer access to a computer?
That would be a question for Mr. Anderson. I'm not sure.
I don't believe that does put
No,
a
that-
computer in
That wouldn't be
everybody's
the
hand,
case,
no.
'cause I mean, the
No.
initial purchase of computers was $5.26 million, and that was 4
Two
years ago. So, I mean, 4 or 5 years ago. So, I mean,
I think it's 20,
No, Mr. Anderson can probably fill in the blanks, but they are buying different computers that are much less expensive. I don't know if it's for
Right.
every child or every other, but,
Every
and
other
we did
kid.
fund some last year, so
Right.
this
Yeah,
is only a
that's-
part.
It's a 2-to-1 ratio, he said.
yeah.
Okay.
So it's 2 to 1.
And I think this also had some money for, Mr. Anderson, for wiring networking that needed to be done inside the schools.
Yeah, that should also be covered in those
Yeah.
funds I was talking about, yeah.
Hey, this is Ronnie Martin. I just want to make one comment, too, about the fact that, this would have been a really painful time to have a conversation about rate taxes. And if you look at where the property tax revenue went year over year, it increased about $19 million, which is what really gave us the ability to do this, to pull. And, I'm not a fan of pulling from, unassigned, general fund reserves, but I understand the need and what we're dealing with. But imagine if we had to add $19 million to that number today in the state of the economy if we were having to do that. So that was a hard decision the council made last year. And it's been hard all year since we made that decision. But hindsight, that was the right thing to do in my opinion.
All right, do we have any other questions? This is probably one of the, I don't want the residents who are probably falling asleep watching to us talk about the budget to think that we're not having an in-depth discussion. We've all had a lot of discussions with staff over the last month and a half, but, really over the last 30 days, the budget, in some sense, was ripped up, thrown away, and redone. And luckily, I think Mr. Tyndall shared this, that Tennessee law gives us the ability to be able to do budget amendments, and that we, I'm looking at this budget almost as a continuation budget that we can really look in 6 months to see where we are. So I don't want someone who's watching this to think that we're not going through the due diligence that we normally would put in a budget. But, I mean, the short answer is we just don't know. And now we've been able to be conservative on the estimates that have come in and what y'all are budgeting, the funds that we're receiving, and that'll let us know in 6 months what we need to do. But we are not planning on any borrowing in the 2021 budget as of now, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. All right, do we have any other questions? Our Zoomers, do y'all have any questions?
I'm good.
All right.
I'm
Thank
good.
you.
This one, yeah.
Yeah, I'll take a minute, just make one comment about this, is that, you know, the evolution and the idea of us taking another look at this, say in September or October, I do want to make sure we say to staff and, you know, to all of our employees, it sounds like, I think, you know, I can't say what everybody said in their meetings with staff, with Craig and Aaron, but, you know, I think all of us have said we want to try to do everything we can not to have layoffs and, you know, not to reduce our employee counts and to reduce, you know, still add jobs where we really need them to deliver the service we need to. You know, I do feel kind of the necessity, and maybe this is the right time, maybe it's not, to say that, you know, the next couple of months here has the potential to change this thing dramatically, this budget, and I don't want that to be lost on anybody and any of our employees that are watching or listening to this. You know, if we have another 8-week shutdown because of an uptick, there's probably going to be substantial layoffs. You know, that kind of stuff. We can't handle $17 million licks twice in a year, or $16 million. We can handle that once, but not twice. And so, you know, I guess there's a lot that you can glean from that, but just, you know that we're trying to do everything we can, and we're hoping that doesn't occur. And so, continue to do everything you can to stay safe and be safe, and yet keep this thing going in a positive direction.
All right, Mr. Gore, Water Resources. Please cue the PowerPoint.
Mayor, Council, thank you for the opportunity. I've got about 12 slides here, and I'll try to summarize our 180-page budget. Just some general comments, I guess, in talking with Doug Swan, our Assistant Director of Finance. We really have not seen a significant revenue sales drop on the water and sewer side. Now, I will say we've got about $80,000 in late fees. That may be a situation where if we've not shut anybody off during this time. We do have about $80,000 in late fees over April and a couple of cycles in May. And that may be something that the Water Resources Board or the council may want to talk about forgiving or not. We're not quite sure exactly how to proceed. We can put payment plans together and so forth, and we do partner with community helpers and some other folks that help pay for the water and sewer bills, but we have not really seen a dramatic shortfall in revenue. So this year's FY21 budget, we're balanced at $55.5 million roughly. We're looking at around $31 million in sewer revenue, $16.5 in water, and some $800,000 with our tap revenue and miscellaneous income. With regards to expenses, we're looking at around $24.36 million, and that's operating expenses. Capital expenditures of around $6.7 million. This is our tap transfer and sinking fund. This is basically what that $7.6 million we bring in as revenue. We expense that into our reserve funds, and we also have some sinking funds that we expense out. And then we've got about a $13.5 million debt service. So comparing that to last year's budget, you can kind of see the total operating expenditures. We're just about 0.1% over. Total expenditures and reserves 0.2% over last year, so we're relatively flat. We have not budgeted for raises or new employees. We have budgeted for about a 1% drop in water sales and about a 3.8% increase on sewer sales. Just growth continues to, the trend continues to show we're between 3 and 4% in revenue on sewer consumption. the majority of those water customers are in CUD. So that's why we show our water sales down and our sewers goes up, because most of that water is being sold in consolidated utility districts area.
Darren,
Yes, sir.
not to interrupt you, but I guess I will. Does people staying at home cause them to use more water or less water? I mean, individual at home, they're using more water.
Yeah.
But is that offset by what they're not using at work, or do we see a significant increase in watering usage because of people being at home?
We could probably dial in. I'm going to probably say yes, that the residential consumption, our customer class of residences will go up. But when you have restaurants shut down, those are large water users, and even some industry. Yeah, a lot of MTSU is a very large water consumer. So obviously, when they let students go home, we saw a drop in the MTSU consumption. So that's the residential usage doesn't really make up for those large drops in the institutional and the commercial side of things.
And potentially just less people in town for that time period.
Right. We did see a lot increase in solid waste, though. I will say that from the residences. So this is kind of I just highlight this to show that the highlighted in yellow, we bring that in as a revenue, and then we expense that out. So that's basically growth driven. That number can fluctuate higher or lower based on growth, and it doesn't necessarily affect the operating side of the budget. We do have, the Northeast Regional Pump Station, Walter Hill Dam, biosolids processing. We do have some sinking funds that we also expense to our reserves. Personnel, we're staying at 181 with 8 part-time folks. We had requested 2.5 new employees. Those are deferred for now. Again, the cost of our new positions, promotions, and raises would have been around $863,000. That cost has been deferred. So that would have been about a 3.7% increase to our expense, operating expense, and about 1.8% to the total budget. That obviously represents a full year. We do have the revenue. We could take that money from those sinking funds, and instead of putting those into the reserves, we could find that money to make those raises occur if the city determines that the economy is strong enough to do that. On the stormwater budget, we're looking at about a $3.15 million revenue based from our stormwater fees. We have our labor benefits, transportation. What we send back to the general fund is about $1 million. We do have stormwater sewer repairs and outside service costs, and then we also this year looking at about $900,000 that we would put into our reserve bucket. This is just a trend line when we actually from FY10 when we started. It was a couple years after we started the stormwater revenue or stormwater enterprise fund. We're right at around $65,000 per year increase every year. That's a pretty high correlation coefficient there of 97. We've gone up 1.6% from our FY20 projections on the budget. This is our 5-year CIP is in our budget book. This is just a graph to represent that 12 months of operating expenses is represented by that green line. And one of the financial objectives or goals of the Stormwater Fund is to not incur any debt. So we would be able to continue to fund all of our capital improvement projects using cash on hand and not exceed that 12 months of operating expenses. Financial policy does say we can go below that 12 months. We have to keep it above 3 months, which is the blue line. So we're well above that. So just a few accomplishments. We did complete our overall creek pump station capacity study. We did fix the Walter Hill Dam has been rehabilitated. We did get the sewer allocation ordinance and companion resolution to protect the city's wastewater collection system and treatment facility. We installed our small-scale biosolids dryer unit at our water resource recovery facility, and we completed our waste load allocation model that we submitted to TDEC in December to try to support our 2021 NPDES permit renewal. and we've updated our watershed characteristics for pollutant reduction on our stormwater modeling. FY21 goals, we're looking at the Northeast Regional Pump Station and force main, finalize our wet weather treatment study at the WRF, complete our application for the 2021 MPDS permit, complete the tank painting projects that you see out there for Mill Street, Halls Hill, and Tiger Hill. And again, we're looking at going to a computerized maintenance management software via CityWorks and create a detailed tree coverage layer for use in iTree and InfoSwim modeling software. That's our stormwater side. So that's really a quick overview of where we're at on revenue, expenses, and kind of goals for this upcoming budget year. I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have them.
You know, one thing you flew over there, I think that with what's going on in Michigan, the compromising of a dam is a significant situation, and with our water supply being just above Walter Hill Dam, the significance of making that improvement, I mean, that's a really good catch and a really good improvement at the right time, I think.
Well, I appreciate that. The value of having the Walter Hill Dam is really significant because that water is not, we don't have to have a Corps of Engineer permit to withdraw from that backwater behind Walter Hill. So it's great to have that as an alternate source, and it gives us a little bit of leverage when we're dealing with the Corps of Engineers on our intake at the lake, which they do. We do have an agreement there and pay a pretty nice fee to pull water out of the lake. But yeah, my goal with the Walter Hill Dam is to just continue to kind of, I don't know how you say, boil the frog. It's just we're going to continue to beef that thing up and keep that dam in nice operating condition without having to rebuild it.
All right, any more questions for Mr. Gore? All right, thank you, Mr. Gore.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll move to Murfreesboro Electric Department, PD.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the City Council. I don't have any slides, but I think everybody's got a copy of our budget. I will make a couple of comments. Like everybody said, the COVID-19 has really presented some challenging times for all of us, and we're certainly not exempt from that, and required us to make some very difficult decisions. We closed our office to the lobby in mid-March. We, as Darren said, we suspended disconnects for non-payment at that same time. Our anticipation is now that we'll resume those collections probably starting June 1. Our 30, 60, 90-day balances are probably about double where they normally are. Of course, we'll be working with these customers to work out payment plans and let them catch this up over several month periods. So it required a lot of unique scheduling. You know, we didn't want to expose our crews to each other. We didn't commingle our crews. We would bring them in staggered schedules and isolate them from the other crews so that if we had a positive test, we would only have to quarantine maybe 5 members of our team instead of 30, 35 members. So it's created challenges. We've stood a lot of people up to work from home, which will be beneficial going forward. And you know, we operated about 7 months with our electronic payment means and our drive-through, and things worked just fine. So I think we'll have less and less walk-in traffic going forward because people have adopted to how they do business with us. But as we've, and you know, as we move forward, we did open our office this past Monday to our walk-in traffic. So you know, the way we're approaching this, you know, we shouldn't fear COVID-19, but we certainly should respect it. And we're asking our people to do all the CDC guidelines, social distancing, and you know, wearing masks in common areas, a number of things that we're doing. But so far so good. We haven't had a positive test yet, and that continues. Before I get into the budget, a couple of accomplishments. We're one of 200 public power systems out of more than 2,000 that received the APPA RP3, which is Reliable Public Power Program Award for outstanding service. Covers a number of factors, including reliability, which we had 99.994% reliability last year. Safety is certainly part of that. We also just received recently the APPA's Safety Award, Safety Excellence of Safety Award. We were the #1 in our category of man hours worked. We went over a full year without a lost time accident or recordable accident, which for our industry is very, our guys should really be complimented for that. So with that being said, I'll get into the budget. Really, I think of it more as an operating plan than a budget. We're not requesting funding. It's just something that we can use as a guideline based on historical data. This is what we project will happen as we go through the year, and things start changing like what we're seeing right now, then we can adjust that plan. So first thing we do forecasted revenue and income statement to see what our net income is going to be, and that way we can determine our source of funds. So there on the first page, you'll see the net income from operations at a little over $8 million. Then we adjust it for non-cash items, which primarily depreciation and amortizations. We get aid to construction of about $1,750,000 we're projecting. And then we always have damages claims for $200,000, $225,000. So we determine our source of funds, which is $19.8 million. Then we look at our use of funds, and when we do our capital budget and we project our financing activities and what all we're going to use funds for, that lets us know if we need to borrow money or if we have adequate surplus funds to use. And so we got about $15 million in capital projects, meters and transformers about $2.1 million, SCADA equipment about $400,000, and IT for a little over $1 million, for a total of about $18.5 million. The only financing activities we have this year would be payment of plant purchase from Middle Tennessee Electric, where annexations occurred, and we have to pay them for 10-year lost revenue. So we paid off all of our debt this month in anticipation of the merger with Middle Tennessee Electric. So there's no debt expense in this report. And then we always kind of allow for contingency for weather, storms, growth that we didn't anticipate. And certainly this year we've been very fortunate that we didn't have to use it, but our neighbors have been hit pretty hard. I can't imagine what this has done to Nashville's budget. So based on our projection of source of funds and use of funds, we're showing about a $900,000 reduction in cash for the year. But we have adequate funds to absorb that. There's no rate increase budgeted here. TVA is not going to have a wholesale increase this year, and we certainly would not initiate a retail increase. The next two pages, as I mentioned, we forecast our revenue and expenses, our different revenues, our electric sales, late payment revenue, miscellaneous revenue, and rent from our poles. Then we've got our operating expenses that total $12 million for operations, about $2.6 for maintenance, and then other expenses, a little over $11 million. So that leaves us operating income a little over $8 million. And then with other income, we're right at $8.153 million net income for the year. Y'all stop me if you have any questions. If you turn over, there's a little detail of our capital budget, projects that we're anticipating. We've got a project on Joe Jackson for about $500,000 there near Amazon, and Rucker Lane, the takeover from Middle Tennessee Electric, is about $750,000. Veterans Parkway to front, coming out of our circuit, our substation on Veterans Parkway, the circuit from Veterans to Franklin will run about $2 million. There's a TVA crossing, Warrior Drive. That's an interstate crossing, and if the merger doesn't go through, then we'll actively start looking for land and to build a new campus that we were already working on. So if we do go forward and the merger is not approved, then we would budget for that again. That's previously budgeted but postponed. And then we've got $1 million budgeted just for new development projects that would come up that we don't know about at this time. I mentioned meters and transformers, about $2,150,000. Substations and SCADA, about $400,000, and IT, and a lot of the IT is cybersecurity. There's some mandates from the federal government as to a number of things we have to do related to cybersecurity at our substations that have been deemed a potential target and could be vulnerable. So, and finally, the financing activities were just the small payments to Middle Tennessee for plant purchased. The next page is our budget assumptions. I won't read them, but we start with our historical purchase power, then we back into our sales. We typically run about 83.5 revenue less power costs. So out of every dollar, about 83.5 goes to TVA for purchase power, which leaves us the rest of it to operate on. So that's just kind of a history of what we use to make our forecasts. The rest of the report is just supplemental information, payroll by department. Projected payroll next year is $8,173,500. We use primarily about 4 contractors that total a little over $4 million. Construction, right-of-way maintenance, underground, and locating. And finally, the last page is just a detail of our commercial insurance and what we provide from our carrier. That's all I've got. Unless anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I have a question for Mr. Tindall.
Okay, Ms. Scales Harris?
Yes, where are we on the sale of MED? What's the delay? What's going on that? Where are we on that?
Ms. Scales, it's in TVA's hands right now. They have to approve the sale. We presented our proposal to them in mid-January, and then, like you, I'm somewhat frustrated too that it's taken as long as it has, but I know they're working diligently on it. They want to make sure that everything's done properly and then they can defend it. To be honest, they're setting the bar very, very high. So we generally have a weekly call with them every week, and I feel very optimistic at this point that it's going to go through. But as far as the timetable, we're targeting July 1. We pushed that back from June 1, and as far as coming together and bringing all of our data together, there's a lot of moving parts to make this happen. It doesn't happen very easily, so it's very difficult when you don't have a firm date that you're shooting for. But we're hoping that we can get an answer in the next week or so. That's being optimistic, and then if we do that, we can meet our July 1 date. If for some reason we don't get an answer in the next couple of weeks, it'd probably push out to August. But we really like the July 1 date.
Right.
That's the end of the fiscal year. It's just nice and clean. It works for a lot of reasons.
Okay. Thank you.
I wish I could tell you for sure. Every week when we have our call with TVA, I'm hoping that's the call where they give us an answer, but we haven't gotten it yet.
Mr. Tindall, we're not, and Aaron, we're not including any anticipated funds in our budget related to MED or Middle Tennessee Electric, correct?
We are not.
Okay,
Not in our operating budget.
right. All right, thank you, Mr. Myatt.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
PD,
Yes,
before you run off, I just want to tell you thank you for everything that you've done with the electric department this year. And I know it's been a challenging year for you at one like I guess you've never experienced, but I hope the stress hadn't been too great. But I know that you've continued to put together another good budget, and you know we're not trying to run anybody off. I'll assure you that we're proud of our electric department. Y'all have been one of the gems in our community, and if you see it's great, and if you go to things that it seems the bulk of your employees seem to favor, you know, happy employees are good employees as well. So I think it's, you know, I still think it's a win-win situation if it works out, but if it doesn't work out, then, you know, you're still a great part of our family.
We had a very good utility before this, and if it doesn't happen, we'll be poised to continue that level of service going forward. But,
Absolutely, thank you.
yeah, I appreciate it. When I agreed to stay on and manage through this merger, I didn't realize I was going to have to do it in the middle of a pandemic, but it's kind of raised the bar just a little bit, but thank you very much.
Anything we can do to put spice in your chili, we'll do it.
So let me amend my answer a little bit, Mayor. The only thing that we did do is we transitioned from the tax in lieu in anticipation of the sale to
Right.
property tax for utilities, which would have been a slight decrease between those two numbers. So
But that's actually preparing for a worst-case scenario from
Exactly.
that side of the budget.
Right, right.
All right, let's move to Murfreesboro City Schools. Mr. Anderson.
Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for your support of Dr. Gilbert. The budget that we have put together has got her fingerprints all over it, and you can tell because it's all about kids. In this budget, some of the things that have been really excellently done in the school district is we are one of 21 exemplary school districts in the state of Tennessee for this year. We have a higher percentage of reward schools than any other school district that had 7 schools or less. We also have 4 of the 42 STEM schools. STEM is, of course, about the STEM and STEAM, about the push towards real integrated learning with the job markets. And of that, we basically are 10% of all the designated STEM schools, and there's 2,450 schools in the state of Tennessee. So we feel that's quite an accomplishment for the school district. We are projecting in this budget 9,531 students. That's an increase of 273. This current year, we grew 303 students. So we're projecting a little less in the continued growth of the district. We are the 24th largest school system in the state of Tennessee out of 142. And a lot of people don't realize, since we're pre-K through 6, how big we really are as a school system. So I wanted to make sure you all were aware of that. Our budget is, general purpose budget is $90,754,000. And in that budget, we have anticipated the growth. We have not anticipated any additional revenues or monies from the city other than this capital improvement program that was discussed earlier. We have, from our extended school program, our federal budget, and our food service, we're a $106 million program in the city of Murfreesboro. So we feel really good about that. We have a balanced budget. The issue that we know we have right now in this whole thing is we have to fit a couple different qualifiers for the state of Tennessee. One is maintenance of effort, of revenue put in. We've met that in our budget. The thing that we are going to have to struggle with until we see how everything ends up is we have to have a 3% fund balance on expenditures, and we think right now we're going to be a little short on that. But we also know we're going to receive $1.2 million in the CARES Act money. The reason we can't show it yet is because they have not given us any direction as to how that's supposed to show in our budget, either current year or moving forward into next year. But that should cover any shortfall that we have in our ability to meet the 3% fund balance amount. We have enough money to make everything work, but we do not have the fund balance issue finished as yet. We also will be receiving FEMA money for the COVID-19, and we are tracking all the things that we expended extra during this time to cover that. In our budget, we've been told by the state of Tennessee that the BEP, the Basic Education Program, which is our largest dollar amount, is solid. It's going to be there again. They did reduce the amount of money in it for additional salaries. They did reduce it from 4% to 2%. We've taken that into consideration. Our property tax monies are good. The question mark we have, like everyone has, is sales tax collections. And we are feeling actually pretty good about that because of all the people moving into the apartments in the city right now, in the new homes on the west side of town. They're all starting to, in other words, they're done with their construction, they're starting to fill up, so we know there's going to be more people. And we tend to attract younger families here, whereas we noticed that Davidson County is actually losing students, we're gaining students, and so is Rutherford County Schools. We were fortunate this year that percentage-wise, we grew a little greater percentage than Rutherford County did. That impacts us because the split in the taxes is based on a percentage of students in your school system. And since we grew a little bit more, that means we didn't lose any of that percentage. So overall, our budget, we feel really good about it. There is the thing that was talked about earlier about the wiring and the access points. That's the majority of that, 80% of that is E-rate funds. E-rate is a fund that is established by the federal government, and it lasts a 5-year window, and you can spend it all in 1 year, you can spend a little bit every year. But this year, and this year only, or 1 year, I call it an election year bonus, we got more per student in that, and that's the money. When you look in your capital outlay, you can see the amount of money we've got is we pay, that's only 20% of the cost. We're going to get over $1 million worth of stuff, and we have to put in about $200,000. So that is why we're really pushing, because we have to spend that money in this 1 year or we lose it. And that's why that's in there like that. And to do that, and when have all the computers working and be up to speed with the wireless connections, that is what we feel super strong about. The other thing that we're doing with the E-rate money is in your schools, we are having wireless hotspots in every parking lot installed. So in other words, if we go through another pandemic where we have to have things where kids have to get to the internet, every parking lot in our school system will have wireless pointed right at those parking lots. And that is built into that E-rate funds. So we feel that was another advantage to getting that E-rate funds intact now. So that's what I have for you. If you have any questions or comments about the budget.
Any questions for Mr. Anderson?
There's no questions. I just want to make a comment. Happened to be out at the administrative offices this afternoon, and when I got there, it was kind of a surprise because everybody was out of the building, and I was wondering what was happening. And the teachers of our elementary schools actually did a caravan around their neighborhoods to celebrate the end of year, and they were cheering, and the buses were, it was a parade that came through, and they asked if they could come out to the administrative offices to just celebrate Linda's contribution to their lives. And it was very touching. It was all the enthusiasm that you can imagine of those teachers. You know, the mark of a leader to me is not just what they do, but the people that they surround themselves with. And sitting in a meeting with the leadership team, the administrative leaders of our school system this afternoon, we have an amazing group of competent, caring professionals. And it's a great tribute to them, but it's a great tribute to the life of Linda Gilbert, that she surrounded herself with this quality of individuals, professional, competent, committed, passionate people that are providing education to our students in our community. And it is a great tribute to her that these kind of people are around her. And I just want to appreciate them as we remember her.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
All right, we'll move to the Evergreen Cemetery.
Ours is probably the simplest budget you'll hear tonight. I'd like to first thank Ms. Wright and Ms. Aaron for, Ms. Tucker for helping me format this in a way that everybody can understand it. As I reported last year, we'll start off with the revenues. We opened a new section called the Serenity section. We have about 780 new graves in that section. It's gone off very well. We started selling in that section July 1 of 2020. And so that section's open for us now. With COVID-19, we've kept our office open. We do not have the 6-foot distancing that we need. Therefore, we conducted business through the doors with our families and over the internet and with our funeral directors, and to keep everything trying to run as smoothly as possible. We have opened the office up at this point, I think Monday, with a small enclosure of polyplex and a desk so we can talk through that to our families and at least get them off the porch. And be in compliance with OSHA and the CDC guidelines. So it's business as usual there. We'll start off with our revenues this year. We anticipate a small drop in the grave sales due to people being out of work, not being able to have that extra money to spend on maybe extra grave sites. They'll probably just want to buy the at-need grave sites. We've had a small drop in grave sales, but the opening of graves is up about 4% right now. So I think that will pretty well suffice for the difference in that area. The expenditures, I don't see anything out of any ordinary this year. Of course, our labor, like any other business, is our highest expenditure. I did put in the new equipment this year for $40,000. We are trying to get out of the mowers that are slinging grass to the side and do the rear cutting mowers. So we are asking, we are putting $40,000 in our budget this year to get 2 more of those mowers so that we can solve that problem. I know families don't like that grass being blown on their mowers, so we're trying to solve that problem with the rear cutting mowers. Other than that, I think our budget's pretty self-explanatory.
Any
Is
questions?
there any question?
Mrs. Brewer. Mrs. Brewer,
Yes, ma'am.
this is Madeline.
Yes, ma'am.
I know last year you brought up, maybe year before last, to us that when we started construction or renovating for the police building, that our manager and the contractor came to you all and got your permission to take down your fence in order to do the work at the police building, with the understanding that the city was going to put your fence back up.
Yes,
But I
ma'am.
understand with all of the theft and trash and everything that was being thrown into the cemetery, that you all went ahead and put up a fence, but the city was going to reimburse you for your fence. Of course, we can't even think about doing anything like that now, but maybe, possibly, in the future, we'll look at keeping our promise to you of putting your fence back up. We told you we got permission to take your fence down, and we told you we would put it back up, right?
Yes, ma'am, you did. I had
Okay,
talked
so
to the,
council-
sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was going to say, council, in the future, let's put this in our down the road revenue, that we do owe the cemetery reimbursement for the fence that we got permission to tear down.
That would be greatly appreciated. I think we spent around $7,000 to replace that fence and make it look nice. And we would appreciate that. I know this year's going to be striving for all of us, so down the road, that would be wonderful if the council could do that for us.
I promise to you, if we can.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Any questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any other fiscal year 21 budget discussions? Ms. Tucker?
I have a question, Mayor,
Okay.
and this is directed at Mr. Tindall. I was just curious, with the staff that we let work from home, did our productivity, did it go up, did it go down, or did it stay the same?
Productivity.
Productivity?
Just
Well, with individuals out for the coronavirus situation, our productivity went down, but then again, the demand for services also went down because people stayed home generally. But I would say that we were able to get by for a couple of months. I wouldn't have been so optimistic with our ability to deliver services, certainly at the standard that our communities expected, much more than where we're at right now.
I was just curious. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Any questions from staff? All right, we'll have to go into public hearing. What's our schedule moving forward?
The public hearing is scheduled for June 4th.
June 4th,
The 6
okay.
o'clock meeting that night.
We anticipate first reading that night and second reading the next week, either at the workshop meeting or that Thursday.
Okay. Aaron, you've been doing a good job at our work sessions about giving us a dashboard, on a monthly basis, and we really don't know. We got our April numbers for our sales drink, April numbers for,
We got March numbers.
March.
Numbers in, yes. So
but we're running 60 days behind, so it's going to be interesting to see what the April numbers are. But I think it's imperative to make sure and keep us up on a monthly basis to let us know exactly where we are. If we need to look at these budget amendments, as Councilman Lance was saying, if there's more conservative measures we need to take, or if things look better than what we're anticipating. So,
absolutely.
all right. So June 4th, we'll have public hearing, first reading, and then June 11th or 18th, we'll have our second and final reading.
Mayor, I know you said June 4th is the public hearing, and I know there's those Facebook warriors out there that have all these great ideas and criticize everything we do when we do a budget. And here's the opportunity to come and speak, and I encourage them to come and speak, because if they've got ideas that can help us run a better budget or run a better city, come and give us your ideas. We'd be more than welcome to hear them. So June 4th.
All right, folks, with that, we will stand adjourned and be ready for our 6 o'clock meeting.